All right. Ladies and gentlemen, settle down. Good morning. Good morning once again. Kindly wave just so that I see we are all together. Assalamu alaikum to our brothers and sisters. Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much. I want to officially welcome you to the inaugural Global South Carbon Markets Conference that is presented by S&P Global together with PIF and RVCMC. Thank you very, very much for making time this morning. My name is Trevor Ombija. Think of me as Trevor Noah, but without the jokes. Or a broke Trevor Noah without the money. I come from Kenya, and it is my first time in Saudi Arabia. I'm very excited and happy to be here. The people of Saudi Arabia are very welcoming. I remember meeting one of them at the airport, and I asked him for directions, and he was like, no English, just Arabic, but welcome to Saudi Arabia. And I was like, that's all the English I need. I don't need any more English. But thank you so very much. English is a strange language. I have studied it myself for the last 30 years now, but there's still things I don't understand. Like, it's okay for me to say, I dance, you dance, but he dances. Why do we add the S for him? Is it that he's dancing more than the two of us? Or but as long as we're all dancing, so we're all okay, right? Thank you so much for making time this morning. So, here's how we're going to do this. We're going to have a very interesting conversation this morning. But first, I'd like you to all take out your phones. Just take them all out, point them towards me, and take a picture. Okay? No, I'm just kidding. Just take out your phones and scan this QR code for me. Scan that QR code. It will take you direct to Slido. Slido is how we're going to ensure this conversation is as interactive as possible. Send in all the questions you may have, all the comments you may have, and we'll display them right here on your screen. All right? That's how we're going to have this conversation. I want to give you a brief history of how I interacted with RVCMC. We were in Kenya for the world's largest voluntary carbon credits auction. And I was an MC there. And I have personally seen the impact of what projects that are driven by carbon credits can do. Clean cook stoves is a big deal for my grandmother in the village. Of course, she still asks me that she needs something to cook on the clean stoves, but she has the clean cooking stoves. That is the first thing, all right? So this is the conversation that we're going to have this morning. Our agenda is going to align to the carbon market agenda for the Global South ahead of COP28, and also discuss key questions around building the carbon infrastructure. Okay? That's the reason why we have this conversation. And I am not the expert here, so I will allow the experts to have this conversation and also allow you to ask all the possible questions that you may have. All right? Everyone has scanned the QR code for me? Have you all taken a picture of myself? You can now send the pictures to me. Thank you very much. And then this conversation begins right about now without any further ado. All right? If we are ready to go, we'll start in the next 1 minute. All right? Brilliant. So without any further ado, let me call to the stage some of the videos that you're going to show you to just give you a brief background of what RVCMC has done, so that you see them. Call your attention to the screens over here. Just 1 minute.
We have a vision of a world that is empowered and innovative, bold and dynamic, and a society that is vibrant and ambitious. And we're at the heart of it all. Driving change and making impactful investments to create a better world.
what we have done so far is only the start.
All right, a round of applause for RVCMC. I think they deserve an amazing round of applause for doing something amazing for the country. Without any further ado, let me welcome on stage the Deputy Governor of the Public Investment Fund, Yazid Al-Humaid. A round of applause for him as he comes up. Thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you so much, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. I know this is our third day, so everyone has got exhausted from, very heavy schedules these days. So today, as you know, countries and investors and organizations around the world are setting targets for zero emissions, recognizing the needs to address climate changes. Today, carbon credits are considered an important element in achieving these goals. Through voluntary carbon markets, organizations can complement their emission reductions strategies by creating and trading these credits. Definitely, this will create a new value chain that direct funding to the communities and projects that need it the most. At PIF, we are proud to have established the regional voluntary carbon markets in a partnership with Saudi Tadawul Group, whom with us today. This company is expected to have a fundamentally positive impact on the carbon credit market. The progress needed to overcome any remaining challenges will be critical in driving global growth for this promising industry. So I'll just give you some highlights since establishment of this company. We held two of the largest voluntary carbon credit auctions globally with a traded volume exceeding 3.6 million tons. And I would say this is just the beginning. I think the target is way, way, way bigger than this. This is an extension, definitely, of PIF commitment to invest in the energy transition through the developments of the Saudi Arabian 70% renewable energy targets, in line with our Vision 2030 targets. By convening an influential global voices here in Riyadh, I think we aim to provide a platform for brainstorming, dialogue, and collaboration to make the progress needed to create a better future. So today, this morning, I strongly encourage everyone to leverage this event to engage in conversation that will bring us closer to achieving our goals. So thank you so much for being here, and good morning for everyone being here, and looking forward for a successful event this morning. So thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Another round of applause for Yazid Al-Humaid, the Deputy Governor of the Public Investment Fund. All right, so we are going to catch up on time. I'm sorry we started a bit late, but I assure you we'll catch up on time. Every speaker who comes up here, I will be timing you. So my cue for you is when you see me walking around there, you know it's about time. If you go beyond that, I'll increase my pace. If you stay longer, I'll start running around here. So the moment you see me running, you know you've really overshot your time. Without any further ado, I'm not the only person from Kenya. Let me introduce His Excellency Ambassador Peter Ogego, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Republic of Kenya. Round of applause for him as he comes up. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Trevor. It's a pleasure to have you in Riyadh, and welcome everybody this morning. I'm the Kenyan ambassador here. It's a great pleasure to be part of this event. And my task is very simple, to introduce our president to you. It's unfortunate that he could not wait for this event. He was here for 2 days, but had to leave back for Nairobi for other, of course, assignments. As you know, the Global South Carbon Markets Conference aims to show perspectives of all elements of this important ecosystem, from suppliers to corporate buyers to global policymakers and standard setters. In June last year, the RVCMC hosted the world's largest voluntary auction of carbon credits in Nairobi, Kenya. 16 Saudi and international companies flew to the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, and took part in the auction, buying over 2.2 million tons of high-quality carbon credits, the majority of which originated from the projects in Africa. So it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce President William Ruto, the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Kenyan Armed Forces, the President of Kenya, who has been here for the last 2 days, to offer a special message. Thank you.
I am delighted to participate in this forum where important conversations are taking place in a setting that offers opportunities for innovative partnerships, inspired collaborations, and transformative win-wins. There are those who believe that the best outcomes only arise out of a gathering of like-minded entities informed by identical experiences and driven by similar incentives. I believe, however, that divergent standpoints, contrasting experiences, and varying motivations can, given sufficient imagination, provide necessary diversity to foster effective cross-pollination and intensify engagements. They also facilitate promising consensus and catalyze paradigm-shifting breakthroughs that ultimately enrich the horizon of shared possibilities on a global scale. Kenya is a direct casualty of the most devastating impacts of climate change. The short rains we are presently enjoying in many parts of the country complete the first full season of normal rainfall after 5 seasons of failed rains, which led to severe drought and intense water stress. Consequently, crop and pastures dried up, driving pastoral as well as arable farmers into food and nutrition insecurity, economic distress, and destruction of livelihoods. Over 4 million Kenyans were on the verge of famine, with many enduring extreme food poverty. Over 2.5 million livestock were lost, and more than 3 million wild animals, including the iconic Big Five, which are celebrated by tourists globally, suffered a great deal. Food prices shot beyond the reach of many households, which drove up the cost of living, whose severest effects were experienced by the most vulnerable in our society. Early in September, Kenya hosted the inaugural Africa Climate Summit, at which we, as African leaders, collaborated to define a strong, clear, and united Pan-African position calling for a stronger sense of urgency and purpose in mobilizing effective climate change. The Nairobi Declaration sums up this position and constitutes our collective position at the forthcoming COP28. This position includes a strong commitment to champion the transformation of the global financial system, including integrity assurance in global carbon credit markets. Kenya has developed a vibrant and secure carbon credit market, which has benefited from our competitive advantage in banking and finance. On its part, Saudi Arabia possesses more than a fifth of the world's known petroleum reserves, which endows it with stability in a world driven by runaway demand for oil and enables its government to oversee an economy which guarantees sustainable development for present and future generations. Most of Saudi Arabia is covered by the hot Arabian Desert, whose daytime temperatures are in many instances very high. I am highly encouraged by the fact that Saudi Arabia is rapidly distinguishing itself as a consistent, ambitious, and determined leader in global climate change activity. Saudi Green Initiative comprises some of the most impressive green projects on record, including wind, solar, green hydrogen, and carbon capture facilities whose sophistication and scale are admirable. Certainly, they are being undertaken with a resolve that makes its emission reduction and energy mix transformation highly attainable well before time. Voluntary carbon markets are critical instruments for channeling resources where they are most needed, and Saudi Arabia has entered in an impressive style. In June this year, the Saudi Regional Voluntary Carbon Market Company held the largest carbon credit auction in history in Nairobi. 15 executives from Saudi Arabia visited Nairobi to inspect the climate projects which generated the carbon credits. Kenya presents immense opportunities for raising carbon credits across various aspects, including nature and technology-based projects. Saudi Arabia, which has a track record of successful collaboration in this respect, can bring its vast growing economy to net zero through our carbon markets. Our possible collaboration offers the distinct promise of fostering innovations and the emergence of new technologies to transform sustainability. While Kenya and Saudi Arabia are differently endowed economies, we are united by the urgency of the imperative to transform climate action to place local and global development on a more inclusive, sustainable, and ecologically responsible footing. Our Vision 2030 and the bottom-up economic transformation agenda commits us to grow 15 billion trees by 2030. In the same vein, Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 and the Saudi Green Initiative mandated to plant 10 billion trees by the same time, 2030. The Global South Carbon Markets Conference, the Riyadh Edition, has assembled the most formidable leaders from every sector: government, private sector, philanthropy, and civil society, to name but a few, and pointed them in the direction of a future that is accessible through collaboration, innovation, and the leveraging of collective imaginations to unlock transformation. I believe that this conference is the right idea, at the right time, in the right place. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
But using a platform like RVCM and us creating a platform from the supply side, then you can have an effective partnership. That's why I was happy with the MOU that RVCM signed with one of our companies here, Livelihoods. I would want to see this MOU implemented. I would want, to see through that MOU a lot of projects coming from Africa, and we want to work together. Because using that platform of honesty, then we can be able to say, well, guys, let's come together. How can you help us?
See, that, ladies and gentlemen, is what we are talking about in terms of collaboration. I think we all deserve a round of applause for being here and also for taking part in literally changing the world, all right? So we are about to start the discussions, and that's why you're seeing the movements around there. I'm standing here because, like I mentioned, we'll keep timing them, and I'll run around if they overshoot their times, but we'll ensure that they keep it within the time frame. So I'll tell you a bit more about the RVCMC CEO and the RVCMC chairperson. That is Riham El-Ghizi and Rania Nashar. The reason why is because we were with them in Nairobi, in the largest carbon credits auction that happened there. And they were very passionate about the impact that the projects have on the people who are most vulnerable, but the smallest contributors to climate change. The center of that conversation was one, my son, who is only 7 months old. Yes, I work on television, so we are very vain. We talk about ourselves all the time. I apologize. My son named Trevor. I named him after myself. Picture this. 2023. That is 100 years from now. None of us will be here. But what impact have we created in the world? That is the conversation that we must have, because it's all about the future. And every single time in humanity, there's always someone who comes up with the right zeal, the right gist, the right mindset to create leadership and change the world. That is what Rania and Riham are literally doing. They are those types of people. And then there are people like me. I only came to Saudi Arabia to look for Cristiano Ronaldo. Anybody knows where he is now? So, but you see, it is those people who create such a big impact. And I'd mentioned earlier on that I'd like you to send in your questions and give all your views on Slido. Let's now demonstrate a bit of how that happens. Allow me to welcome Riham El-Ghizi, RVCMC CEO. A round of applause for her. She comes up. And Atul Arya, Senior Vice President, SMP Global. They will answer a few questions and show you how Slido works. Like we mentioned, this is going to be a very interactive session. Riham.
Thank you. So get your phones out. This is one place where we say don't put your phones away. Okay? And don't look at that bar, look at this QR code, okay, the one on the slide. There will be some questions for you. Some of them have a right answer, some of them have no right answer, okay? Riham is going to run through those questions for you. You have about 15 seconds to respond and we will see the results, okay? Don't over-engineer. This is just a fun quiz to get you all warmed up.
I'm going to test your question. Answers, Omar.
Yeah, okay, let's go, team, with the first question. Yeah.
Okay. Let us put the first question on the screen.
There we go.
So what did you have today at the breakfast? Coffee, tea, juice, soft drink, or no breakfast? Answer on your app.
Answer on your app, yeah. I hope you remember.
Having no breakfast is
okay. Let's look at the answers.
Next one.
There we go. Oh, my God. Kenya, you need to sell more coffee to these guys, more tea to these guys, you know?
A great opportunity, yeah.
All right.
Next question. To offset emissions from my travel, I do not buy offsets because I do not know how offsets work. I do not buy offsets because they are not real. Offsets are too expensive and I cannot afford them. Or I buy offsets and I believe in them.
This is the real test for commitment for carbon.
The tricky one.
Okay, let's look at the answers, team.
Okay,
all right, well,
today's conference will be a great opportunity for you to understand more about offsets. We're having several sessions to talk what is carbon credit offset, what are buyers' role, traders, and so on and so forth. So stay with us for the full day then.
And Riham, we need to convert these people who don't believe in offsets as well. Okay.
We need to, we'll do the conversion as well.
Okay. Next question.
Which of the following is not a greenhouse gas? Methane, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, water vapor, hydrofluorocarbons.
Now this is a tricky one, okay?
Yeah.
I can see some people are smiling because they know the answer. That's not very good. Okay. I'm just kidding you. Okay? Team.
Let's see the answer.
The correct answer is sulfur dioxide. Actually, water vapor is a very potent greenhouse gas. Yes.
It stores energy.
Next one.
Next one. What percentage did Africa contribute to global carbon emissions from fossil fuels? 4%, 8%, 9%, or 12%?
Okay.
Answers?
Let's see the answers, team.
That is correct. It's 4%. Yet, as we heard from President Ruto, the impact is huge. 4 million people only in Kenya were prone to famine last year. So despite of the less emissions, the high impact is in Africa and in the global south. And that's why we're here today to talk about carbon markets in the global south.
Yes. Okay, we have a couple more questions. Okay, next one.
Where the world's biggest ever auction of carbon credit takes place? Riyadh, Nairobi, New York, Singapore. We better get this right.
This is a giveaway.
Yeah.
This was for people who are feeling bad by now getting everything wrong, right? Okay, let's see the answer. I'm sure people are.
I don't know who did the 25% or the 1% who did not go to New York. We operate and will be present in the Global South. This is what the voluntary carbon market, our company here from Saudi Arabia, is doing. We are leaders in the Global South. This is our vision, and this is what we're going to execute. Next.
I think last question.
This is the last one.
Let's do it. Yeah.
What proportions of carbon credits sold at RVCMC largest auction originated from Africa? 1/4, half, 3/4, all. So this is our last auction in Nairobi.
One more. Okay. There's one more. Yeah.
One more?
Yeah. This is a very easy question as well. Okay, so
Yeah?
let's get this right. Okay, team, let's look at the answer.
It is actually C. 3/4 of our credits came from Africa. We had from Egypt. We had from South Africa. We had from Morocco, Rwanda, Burundi, and different 37%.
So people are changing the answers.
Yeah. No cheating.
You
That
guys
is
are
not
getting into the
acceptable.
trick. Okay.
Yeah. 39. Keep going.
All right, let's look at the last question.
Oh my God. This is the very last question that we have. How many tons of high-quality carbon credits were auctioned in Nairobi in June 2023? 500,000 tons, 1 million, 1.5, over 2 million tons.
If you're paying attention to the video, you would have got the answer to this question.
Yeah, it's an easy one.
Okay, let's do it.
Over 2 million. Keep changing, please. I know. It's, the right answer is over 2 million ton. It was the biggest in the history of the auctions. We are planning to launch our exchange mid-next year together with an auction facilities, digital auction facilities. So hopefully this is not, as we said before, this is just the start for the regional voluntary carbon market. And thank you very much.
Thank you,
for
and I think
participation.
All right, another round of applause.
for this event. You'll learn a lot through the course of this day. Thank you for coming.
All right, a round of
Over to you.
applause for Atul and Riham again. Thank you very, very much. Now, we've already caught up with time. I promised you will keep time. So in the next 30 minutes, I want to introduce the next panelists, and they'll have a conversation for 30 minutes. Like I promised, I will be right here to start pacing, then run around when it shows you that your time is up. Let me call upon the stage Lynn Tatum, S&P Global Commodity Insights. A round of applause for her. She comes up. She will be the moderator of this session. It's about spotlighting carbon projects in the Global South. Let me also call upon Kanyinke Sena, board member, ICVCM, director, the Indigenous Peoples of Africa Coordinating Committee. A round of applause for him as he comes up, because this session is going to amplify the voices of the indigenous communities, where we'll all hear from them. And then Kenneth Newcombe, CEO, Sequest Capital. A round of applause for him as he comes up as well.
Welcome, Ken.
Thank you so much. In the next 30 minutes, Lynn, it's over to you.
Thank you, Trevor, for doing such a fabulous job in getting us all going and getting the spirits up, as I can see here in the room. And we're very delighted to be here as S&P Global, partnering with RVCMC and PIF with this fabulous project. And you've heard the references made to Riham and Rania about their leadership in setting up this project. And I've seen in the short few days I've been here that that passion really, truly rings through. And I think you saw on the video Riham out there cooking with the people, really encouraging this way of using the projects and bringing the community into the whole carbon markets orbit. And that's what we're going to start talking about this morning. So our first session is about amplifying the voices of the indigenous communities here. And the carbon markets are a little bit opaque in terms of people truly understanding what's happening with the markets. Can they really be a force for good, as we hear? Can the Global South benefit from all of the activity in the carbon markets as we progress on a path to net zero? And what are the barriers that we're seeing out there that sometimes get highlighted? And what are the pathways to success? So on our panel this morning, we have a voice of the indigenous community in the form of Dr. Kanyenke Sena, who's been, he's the director of the Indigenous Peoples of Africa Coordinating Committee. He's a real pioneer around the world, not just in Africa, of leading the conversation about how the markets can work in the indigenous community. And then we have Kenneth Newcomb, who is the CEO of Sequest Capital, who's really taken a leadership position in getting the capital markets galvanized. So we're going to hear from both of them. We have the opportunity for questions. So do pose your questions through the Slido app that you were just using. They'll come to me on the iPad, and I'll be able to pose them to the panel members here. So straight off, I'm going to turn to Dr. Kanyenke, and we're going to look at the major challenges and barriers that you're seeing. So can you just spotlight some of the projects you've been involved with in the Global South, how they benefit the people and the environment, and how you've been working to overcome, what might be regarded as an obstacle in your way?
Thank you. I hope I'm laudable. So, first of all, let me take this opportunity to recognize the presence of the Deputy Governor, the Kenyan Ambassador, obviously, and our President. You see, a lot of us from Africa are from Kenya. So, Trevor, I promise you that when I grow up, I'll try to be as eloquent as you as we go forward. This is my second time in Saudi Arabia. The first time I was in Ulula, and I really think that is the most beautiful place on earth. And then I came to this big city called Riyadh, and I got lost a lot in the morning before I arrived there. But I'm glad that I was finally able to. So, and that actually shows the relationship that Kenya has with Saudi Arabia. And I will not repeat what the President has just emphasized on, inviting you to cooperate with us as we build the carbon market space. And as a representative of the communities where all this will be taking place, I also extend my invitation to all of you. So as you come to Kenya, we will invite you within this framework of nature-based solutions through the carbon credit markets. And in that, we'll only be looking at three things, actually. Protecting our ecosystems, managing them, restoring them, but at the same time benefiting the communities. So when we say communities here, we mean the greater common good of all the people of Kenya, and specific communities that will be directly impacted by those projects. So, and around these communities, only two issues are mostly what we hear. And these are rights and equity issues. So these are two very, very broad topics. When we talk about rights, we are looking at resource rights, e.g. land rights, forest rights, water rights, all these kind of rights that people need to live, to survive. We are also looking at issues of consultation and participation. And generally, we keep hearing of this free, prior, and informed consent. But most importantly, we hear language of benefit sharing. So, and this now brings in the issue of equity. What do we mean by fairness in all the projects that we do? Fairness in terms of the ecosystems, fairness in terms of rights, fairness in terms of building benefits for the communities. And believe you me, communities also, they want to be rich. When I looked at the GDP of Kenya and the GDP of Saudi Arabia, I was quite shocked, We want to grow to that level too, but at the same time ensuring that our environments are safe. We keep hearing this language of carbon credits being a false solution. In our view, it's not a false solution, but offers a great opportunity for communities. And I'll give a few examples now of some of the projects that I'm involved in, directly as a leader of a network, and also as a member of the Integrity Council of the Voluntary Carbon Markets, which is based in London, but sets global standards for carbon integrity through the supply chain. We also work closely with the Voluntary Carbon Markets Initiative that looks at integrity from the demand side, and I'm also part of the African Carbon Markets Initiative. So that means that we are very, very strongly committed with this. So I want to look at two projects, one very briefly and one in greater detail. So one of the projects I want to discuss is in Tanzania among the Hadzabe community. So these Hadzabe are kind of totally cut off from the rest of the country. They are the only community actually currently in Africa that mostly practice purely hunting and gathering. They don't farm, they don't till, so their lives depends completely on the ecosystem. And they have been facing these challenges from different quarters. And their land was being taken away by more powerful communities, especially pastoralists and farmers. But once the carbon credit came through Carbon Tanzania, the first thing they did was secure that right, their land rights, through what they call in Tanzania a community title. And then secondly, when the carbon money started coming into the communities collectively decided that half of 50% of what they get will be deposited in an hospital as insurance for the members of that community. So here we see that a carbon credit has benefited both secured the land and at the same time is benefiting the community in various ways. But of course, let me now come and discuss one of the biggest projects we have in Kenya, besides the Kasigao Wildlife Corridor, which was among the first REDD+ projects we had. But now we have this soil carbon project, which kind of relates to the desert carbon because northern Kenya is mostly arid. And this northern Kenya soil carbon project actually in the past 3 years generated about $20 million. $14 million of this went directly to the communities. And it secured over, I think, 2 million acres in northern Kenya among 14 community conservancies. So and this focused on actually rangeland restoration. So when you look at it, restoring 2 million acres was quite big, but the $17 million directly to the communities was actually bigger, was a bigger benefit. What did the community do with this $17 million? 70% went to education, bursaries. Others decided to build shopping complexes to generate more income. Others decided to construct hospitals. Others decided to construct water projects. So we see that nexus between ecosystems and nature. But of course, because before Trevor starts running, of course, there are many challenges. One challenge is that we lack the capacity. Most communities, not only in Kenya but in Africa, don't fully understand what is the whole discussion about carbon is about. So we need a lot of capacity in that. Capacity not only to understand, but capacity to also be able to develop our own carbon projects and sell it to markets. We also need capacity among our policy makers. It's quite low. But of course, not only do we need capacity to develop, but we also need capacity to monitor, to report and evaluate these projects to ensure that they have that carbon integrity that the market wants. We also see a serious lack of political will, but as you can see from what the president has said, that political will is being generated through things like the carbon market, the African Carbon Markets Initiative. Kenya now has a carbon market, and of course we see also a number of carbon legislations coming up in several countries to regulate the market. But we still see a big challenge from mainstream human rights NGOs that are still opposed to that carbon, and they still present it as a false solution and scare communities that your land will be taken away, yet evidence shows that not a single parcel of land has been taken. So we are looking forward as community representatives, we are looking forward to partnerships, and we know that we are not perfect. We cannot achieve rights and equity perfectly, but it will have to be a journey of learning by doing. So with that, let me stop there and say thank you all of you for listening, and I'll be ready to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Kanyenki. And now, Ken, I think we're turning to you from a financial perspective. You know, you're putting capital into these areas, and I think that I'm sure you've addressed in your health and other occasions these issues that are being raised here. So talk to us a little bit about how you see yourself as an individual out there providing solutions for some of the barriers that we might perceive to be in place in these markets.
Well, of course, a key barrier is capital. But we're dedicated as a private company to transform the lives of 100 million people in Africa through 2030, starting out by providing them, women in particular, clean cooking solutions. What we recognize, and what I recognize having spent 24 years in the World Bank, mostly as a senior manager, is that development finance institutions and NGOs are very limited in terms of their capacity to bring about change. The right kind of private company, facing women in households every day, responding quickly to their needs, is essential to transform their lives. So this is the dry season in Africa. The rains will begin in December. And at this time of the year, every day, we are installing 10,000 stoves, efficient stoves, in 5,000 households every day. And we employ, for every 500 households, a person in the community called a stove champion to follow up and make sure that stove is maintained and in use and the benefits are realized. The investments we've made to date will generate through 2030 about 300 million tons of carbon credits. But this is just the beginning. Why do we start with clean cooking? Because we know that empowering women is the way to bring about change in Africa. Women are the gardeners, the caregivers. They create functioning families. And without functioning families and without women that are not burdened by drudgery and the burden of disease from inhaling smoky fires, they will not be able to adapt to climate change. And they are, after all, the most vulnerable people in the world. This is a means to an end. And so what's the end? The end is to climate-proof smallholder agriculture for subsistence food production and for cash crop. Because without the 2 to 3 hours extra a day that we provide women and the healthy families and functioning family units, they will not be able to change the way they produce food and restore their working landscapes. The challenges is education, capacity, and de-risking their very conservative approach to agriculture developed during colonial times. The very sad thing is that in their history, for most of Africa, they were taught to do the wrong things in growing food. They were taught to clean the fields, remove trees, burn the residues, and gradually deplete soil organic carbon and fertility. But if you're in their shoes, what's the biggest risk? You ask them to change to something that looks radically different, and yet they think that could lead to starvation. It's a very big risk to change what you're doing if you're already living on a knife edge. So carbon finance and capital from the likes of those in this room can underwrite that risk, can provide certainty that they will be fed by standing by and ensuring, yes, if this solution we're providing you with is not as promised, you will still have revenue, you will still have food. And we will give you the confidence, we'll give you clean water through boreholes, we'll give you new industries like honey and make sure there's a route to market for high quality produce. We'll give you high grade seeds while you undertake this transition. So you have to look at risks through their perspective, and that needs capital, and the most efficient way to deliver this capital in this era is not through development finance institutions, but through the private sector who are motivated to look after women and families day to day.
And how are you spreading that message? Are you proactively engaging capital in the other side of what you do?
That's why I'm here.
Okay.
No, look, it's a rather significant challenge because what we're proposing are very different things and on a scale which has never been achieved. Our ambition is to transform cooking for 1 million households in every country that we work in. And the ambition is to say that any young girl who grows up in a household using our clean cooking solution would never think twice about going back to an open fire because we can provide them from the products that we now produce in our factories across Africa, a clean cooking solution for the price of a good cooking pot, between $10 and $20. So what's the key point of communication? First is governments themselves. We are partners with government in long-term sustainable development. And that's an unusual step for governments to see a private company as an intergenerational partner and not here for the life of a carbon project. So that's one point of communication. The other is to encourage capital. One of our investors is the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Singapore, who is motivated to change the lives that are now challenged by climate change and is able to communicate far better than we are about our shared visions. And participating in venues like this is absolutely essential to mobilize capital to underwrite our mission.
So turning back to Dr. Kanyinki and continuing this conversation, do you first of all, do you have a comment on these Clean Stoves projects? And can you point to other success areas that we might focus on to see how we're getting engaged with the project?
I think first of all, I really appreciate your comments because though cooking is providing a clean stove and fuel efficient stove has a lot of benefits for the environment, most importantly, it impacts women directly more than anybody else because when you go to these communities, women spend a long time looking for firewood. Like in my community where I come from, they go look for firewood in areas with lions, elephants, because I come from near the Masai Mara, and they expose themselves into a lot of risks. So such projects that can really save women that risk is really such a good one. The issue of agriculture too is a very, very nice idea. As you say, the slash and burn practices is what is leading much to deforestation in the continent and desertification. So if those alternative solutions are something that would really work best for the communities. The only thing I can say is amplify and emphasize on the importance of partnerships. Governments alone cannot manage. When you look at all the carbon projects that are working in Kenya and Tanzania, they're driven by the private sector. Kasigau Corridor, Wildlife Works. Northern Kenya, Natives Investment. Tanzania, Carbon Tanzania. So these are private companies doing carbon projects, and they're quite successful. So that's why we say we open the doors to accelerate that, so that because communities are really in a difficult position. As you know, they are most impacted by climate change and the least able to adapt to climate change. And the mitigation solutions, like REDD+, the debate is taking quite long within this UNFCCC framework. So if the private sector can come in and accelerate things quickly, learning by doing, I think we'll be heading to that direction.
The private sector. So in terms of the practicalities of how the system works, as it were, let's talk about from the financial side. I mean, we do sometimes hear that there's a lack of visibility, transparency in how the credits are retired. Are we really taking positive action here? Is there a risk that the indigenous people are not always, we've had a really beautiful example just here, but some of the projects may not always work. So there's a lot of uncertainty and doubt out there still, perhaps, about the functioning of the credits. And clearly people need utter confidence in order for the markets to be truly amplified. Could you both give a comment, please, on how we can have some security around that?
Look, I think it's first really important to understand that carbon credits as a commodity is really only 18 to 20 years old. And it's a very different commodity. It's not like Brent crude or metallurgic coal with very precise specifications. And it's created in an incredibly diverse number of ways, from land use change to all forms of energy efficiency. And the methodologies that have evolved to quantify and verify this commodity as emissions reductions are evolving rapidly, and the way they evolve is through valid criticisms of their deficiencies, of the projects. How do you measure something that you can't touch, feel, or smell? How can you be sure that when you buy an emission reduction that is a ton of CO2 equivalent, that the atmosphere benefits to that extent? That means that there has to be this cut and thrust of criticism to tighten up the methodologies and improve the credibility of the processes. I know, and I'm constantly facing criticism that says, are you sure that your stoves are in use? Are you sure that the trees are planted that you say they are? And we have to get better at persuading people that these are real. We have a very sophisticated data capture system that records every stove, every 2 stoves in every household in a global database. Every time a stove champion visits, they re-photograph, re-GPS, record the state of repair, encourage good repair, and open up the kitchens for better ventilation. But we know that we have to do better. So we're now installing heat sensors in a sample of the population in rural areas, which detects whether the stove is actually used or not. And we hope to have a correlation, a good correlation, between the number of heat sensors, quite expensive devices, that show the frequency with which a stove is used, and the visits and reports of stove champions, which report, in theory, the same thing. Is the stove there? Is it working, or is it not? If we get that right, then we can use those actual data uploaded to the cloud on a daily basis, or whenever, I should say, we can go to the data loggers and scan them and lift up the data. And that will be really good, solid proof that these emissions reductions are being achieved. We distribute bamboo seedlings to every household who uses their stoves every year. And we're required by the methodology to have near-field communication chips in those bamboo, and everyone has to have that, and we have to scan that for a record of visiting it and recording its growth. What's the problem? The kids steal the little NFCs cards. They might take the heat sensors. It's an ongoing challenge. But I absolutely agree with you. We need to get better at ensuring the integrity of what we do. And wherever we can, we measure precisely and report transparently the outcome of our work.
Great to hear. Doctor, last word on this. We have less than a minute. We have Trevor.
Yeah, just the last word is I would really like you to follow what we are doing at the Integrity Council of the Voluntary Carbon Market to ensure carbon integrity on the supply side. We have developed 10 core principles that we look at governance of that carbon to guard against many of the challenges that are being presented, emission impacts, and also to ensure that there's sustainable development. And we are developing a whole program of also training and raising awareness among communities, and we'll be at the Conference of Parties 28, and I hope there we can continue with this discussion, but we are also open to discussing bilaterally after this panel. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, both speakers. I think we really appreciated that conversation. I think we've set the scene nicely for the rest of the conversations coming along, and I'm going to hand over to Trevor now for his excellent moderating to introduce our next speakers. Thank you so much again.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for Lynn, Kenneth, and Kanyinke as they go down. Asanteni sana. It's all about capacity building, carbon capital, finance, partnerships, and also understanding the carbon credit system. Without any further ado, so we've caught up with time, which is good. Let me call upon the stage, and she's already coming up, Gauri Johar, Executive Director, Energy Transitions and Clean Tech Consulting, S&P Global. Where is Gauri Johar? A round of applause for her. She goes up. And Mariam Shehu Mohammed, Senior Vice President and Business Development Executive, Carbon Vista. A round of applause for her. She comes up. Thank you very, very much. And Murray Collins, CEO, Space Intelligence. This next session is about examining the quality of carbon credits coming from the global south. Kindly, let's just settle down and give them exactly 30 minutes. We'll also time that. Let's just settle down before they begin. Let's settle down. Thank you very, very much. I know some of us have flights to catch. We'll make this short and sweet and ensure you catch up with your flights, all right? Gauri, over to you.
Thank you so much, Trevor. Thank you, everybody, to be here for our second panel of the day. It is, I welcome you to Unearthing the Projects, Examining the Quality of Carbon Credits in the Global South. I am Gauri Johar, Executive Director for Energy Transitions Consulting from S&P Global, and it's delightful to have a panel which will help unpack this issue. We have Mariam Shehu Mohammed, Senior Vice President and Business Development Executive from Carbon Vista, and we have Murray Collins, who's the CEO and co-founder of Space Intelligence. A very warm welcome here. I think there was a great segue into this panel in the Lynn's last panel, which was about, are you sure? Are you sure about the projects? Are you sure about the quality of credits? And I think it was a spark left for this panel to take off on. So I'll start on Are You Sure, actually, with Murray, who you've described yourself as a recovered academic, but I would say you've brought rocket science to nature-based solutions. How can we be more sure based on what you're bringing?
Yeah, great. It was a great setup. But first off, I wanted to say thank you very much for having Space Intelligence here, to the PIF for inviting us. Assalamu alaikum to everybody in the room. I found out from Abdul Rahman on the way in that Saudis are actually, contrary to popular opinion, very, very keen on rain. So thank you to Abdul Rahman for that. This key point, is a fantastic setup for this panel, because there was a question about how do you know what's going on across very, very large areas in parts of the global south. So what we do at Space Intelligence, we're a data analytics company leveraging a long history of analyzing satellite data to look at nature-based solutions projects. So currently we're supporting companies like Apple with their $400 million Restore Fund, Shell and Equinor with their investments in nature-based solutions. And how do we help people to know what is happening? We use very large volumes of satellite data analyzed in a machine learning framework to be able to estimate carbon stocks and the changes in land cover over time. And these are the key things which you need to know to monitor the impact of forest carbon projects. So here's a key takeaway, that there is technology available now, particularly for nature-based credits, to understand the impact that you're having when you buy, so from Reham, you buy some of these credits, you can have the confidence that they're having the impact which is claimed.
Absolutely. So you are now taking that satellite-based information and putting it into a project and a platform and a database which can be accessed over time by a group of companies, right?
Yeah, so typically the way we work is on a B2B basis. So a company who's working with us, typically they'll have a range of solutions which they buy from us. So an initial due diligence phase, if you're looking to invest in a project which already exists, we'll provide the independent third-party data which examines the project's baseline prior to investing into that project or buying its credits. And then over time, we can monitor the performance of that project. So we offer the monitoring, the reporting, and verification of how that project performs over time.
Great. So moving on, I got reminded of one of the calls to action which Riham, you shared in the whole vision to the RVCMC endeavor, that we need to use every single tool available to tackle the devastation impacts of climate change. And I'd just like to add the element of partnership to that, which has also been displayed by the partnership which Carbon Vista represents here. So Mariam, could you share what is Carbon Vista and what is this new partnership with an oil trader all about?
Yes, very interesting. Thank you, Johar, and thank you to the RVCMC team for having me here. Carbon Vista is a joint venture between Nigeria's Sovereign Wealth Fund and the global commodity trader Vitol. And our goal is to provide high-quality carbon credits to oil and gas-dependent economies and conglomerates seeking to decarbonize. And this is very beautiful for us because our vision is to provide those offsets from projects developed in Nigeria to begin with, expanding across Africa to buyers. And to provide context, why did we choose to partner with a trader? I always use the analogy, Africans, we know what we want to do. Sometimes the how isn't very clear. And so what we've decided as Nigeria's Sovereign Wealth Fund is, let's partner with people who already know how to do it. Let's bring them in Nigeria, give them the enabling support, enabling framework, work together with government, all arms of government, and ensure that this establishment called Carbon Vista catalyzes several other initiatives that help reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Africa and in the world.
Very good. So first of all, congratulations again to that. And I believe it also feeds into an African Carbon Markets ACMI initiative. Could you share more about that?
Absolutely. And so to give you context, what we've realized across Africa is some governments and people in general are a bit skeptical for good reason. Some of the terminologies around carbon credits are a bit too, I remember when I first started, I was all up in the air. That's one. The concept needs to be very well understood by people, communities, and the government in order to have the required support. And then the government can turn around and provide the enabling regulatory framework that provides transparency and comfort to Riham and other very important buyers that we have in this room and across the globe to buy the offsets from our country. And that is the vision of the Africa Carbon Markets Initiative, which we are supporting very, very well, to have that enabling ecosystem that when we supply carbon credits to the globe, that these credits can be retired and utilized by whoever is buying them.
Right. So I think there's a common theme here between Murray and you. It's about the surety, it's about the quality, it's about the trust of that carbon credit, that it's verified and then reported, and it can be monetized, and of course it has real impacts on emissions. Murray, coming back to you, I think in preparing for this panel, you shared some fantastic statistics. There was a reference to 2%, 1.3 to 1.6 billion, 12 to 15%. Can you unpack these numbers for us? Because I thought those were very useful takeaways. Okay, yeah.
So the big picture, why we're all here and thinking about decarbonisation, is we've got these targets set for 2030 coming out of the 2015 Paris Agreement. Fully 30% of all the emissions reductions that we need to make as a global society have to come from nature-based solutions. That's a huge number, and yet these nature-based solutions are only attracting 3% of the funding. And so there's a massive imbalance. And so that's why it's fantastic to hear what you're doing to crowd more capital into this space. But if we can crack this, if we can get more capital going into forest conservation and restoration around the world in particular, we'll also be addressing two parallel global challenges. So first, the biodiversity crisis. The world's tropical forests, mangroves, are some of the most diverse ecosystems on the planet, the most diverse terrestrial ecosystems. But moreover, there's somewhere between 1.3 and 1.6 of the world's poorest people are dependent on these natural ecosystems. So if you're able to crowd this funding into forests in Nigeria, but right across the global south, not only will we be achieving a third of the emissions targets that we've committed to make under the Paris Agreement, but we'll also be addressing the biodiversity crisis and addressing economic development for some of the world's poorest people. I think that's an incredibly powerful argument. The flip side of this is that you have to consider that unless we do crowd sufficient finance into nature-based solutions, we won't be able to hit the Paris targets. We won't be able to get to a 1.5 degree world. So that's another way to look at this problem, is that, and think about what that world means. It means an increasingly unlivable planet, more hostile. We heard at the plenary session that this is going to cost the global economy over $5 trillion. And so this sets a very, very urgent agenda.
And I think in reference to this, one more thing, Murray, you had shared about this forced dichotomies in the arguments here. Can you give us a glimpse of that as well?
Well, I think there's some false dichotomies in that people have been talking about within nature-based solutions, so the generation of carbon credits, whether to do avoided emissions or whether to do removals, so reforestation and restoration. We have to do both. It's a false dichotomy. Avoided losses, so avoided emissions, those kind of projects have come under a lot of scrutiny recently, but as I've just said, it's absolutely essential that high-quality avoided emissions projects are included in the voluntary, and I'm going to say aspire to be a verified carbon market. It has to be in there. Another false dichotomy, so a false choice, is in the investment in human economic development, biodiversity, or in these nature-based solutions projects. They all go hand in hand. You can't have large monocultural restoration projects. These have to be biodiverse systems which we recreate, which provide ecosystem services for the local communities.
Mm-hmm. So your call to action here really is about taking that voluntary, making it verified, so that we should really stand for verified carbon market.
A verified carbon market. I mean, we've heard those calls came a lot from the New York Climate Week.
Yeah.
The idea that these carbon credits are a voluntary action, I just don't think it's true anymore. So I've spent a lot of time with corporates in New York Climate Week, and they're really recognizing that in order to be able to sell your products, you have to have a very, very strong position in terms of sustainability. Ultimately, that's going to affect your margins, and it may even affect your revenues. If you're producing something which is perceived, whether it's in a B2B or a B2C context, as having a negative impact on the planet, then people are going to start to move away from your products and services. As a consequence, I believe that companies should abate, so reduce emissions across their supply chains where possible, but also compensate. And nature-based solutions, if you roll back to the McKinsey marginal abatement cost curve, nature-based solutions and avoided emissions from deforestation and degradation, something we can do now. We know that it's something which is relatively cheap, but to reiterate this point, it's a world where you can also have an enormous impact on biodiversity and human economic development.
And picking on the point on biodiversity and sustainability, which is such a broad and sometimes also partly misunderstood term, or understood in many different ways, I think, Mariam, what I found fascinating about the story you were narrating to me was how you really are so passionate about this field and how it goes back to scuba diving, actually. Can you share, I think that was such a wonderful anecdote to share with and how it leads to how you approach your work towards livelihoods in Africa.
Absolutely. Thank you. One of my passions is to go into, when I travel, I love to scuba dive, especially, so I naturally love to go to countries that have large ocean and beachfronts. So I remember when I had my first scuba diving experience in 2011, the instructor told me, Mariam, you shouldn't smile underwater because if you smile, water will go into your goggles. And that was a very difficult thing to be asked to do. And I remember when I was in the water, the beauty that I saw, the color, the diversity, of course I smiled. And, but fast forward, when I was at my last scuba diving experience at Sharm el-Sheikh last year, the diversity just wasn't there. And it made me sad. And this is one of the reasons that I've decided, and I'm very passionate about nature and about conserving the beauty that we have. The corals have bleached, they're white, and if you would like a lot more context about this, I recommend the documentary by David Attenborough, The Earth. It's a phenomenal documentary. Leading to your question about engagements, what we have found in our work at Carbon Vista is to enable us do projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we need to engage communities at a very, very grassroots level. Very important. It helps us scale. There's a very large population of very talented young people in Africa that cannot be ignored. That's one angle. The second angle is these communities are actually very, very friendly, very, very willing, like I mentioned. However, there are processes, very simple tools that I will share that will help as we develop more projects in Africa. And I encourage all of us here to look to Africa to develop more of these projects. Mm-hmm. One of the things we've cracked, 1 out of 3, is embrace the community in their governance levels. So when we go into communities, we first engage their existing governance levels. They're actually very, very organized. It may not look as prim and proper, but very organized governance levels. This builds trust across community, and it helps the community embrace whatever project that is being brought. I'll give you an example also of one project that really demonstrates that, our clean cooking project. When we go into these communities, they're happy to take on these tools because they trust the people who are in the community. We work with community leaders. The second is build with them in mind. Mm-hmm. When the communities observe that these people who come in are actually building for us, either products that we can use ourselves or products that we are happy to participate in building, they are more than happy to support. Think of them as the front line. If anyone in another community or another miscreant decides to create harm, you don't even need to go to the law enforcement. That community will completely annihilate whatever threat is coming because you've employed them, you've built a community that supports them, and that is a very important point. And last but not least is sharing dividends with them. Mm-hmm. I personally am not a proponent of hand-me-downs. Right. I'm not a proponent of giving people cash. Mm-hmm. What we support is capacity building, teach them what to do, teach them the how, and provide them with enough tools that help them, whether it's electricity, right? Whether it's excess power. And one company does that, actually. They've been operating in a rural community in Nigeria for 80 plus years, simply because they're a manufacturing company, and what they've decided to do is they are operating for 24 hours, and they have, for sure, excess power. So they provide power to the local community. Suddenly, that community that had blackouts is actually better off than half the rest of the communities that they know, and actually a good number of communities in West Africa. And that's a good benefit. So they have cooling, they have electricity to watch football, they can have nice cool drinks. Those communities have not allowed a single harm to happen to that company, and they've been operating for 80 years. Carbon projects require that multi-generational view in development, and that is why community development is very, very important, and that is our approach.
That's really resonates, I think, with the messages which Ken also shared in the last panel about this multi-generational, as you said, and it's intergenerational, as I think he mentioned, and he talked about the stove champions. So I think it's fascinating how the buy-in of the community is so important, and I think this is a concept which is quite familiar to us in the industry as the social license to operate, because they are part of it. And this is not part of just CSR, right? This is beyond CSR.
Beyond CSR, beyond CSR. This is actual empowerment. Let me give you context. 3 projects that we're looking at Carbon Vista. Right. The first is clean cooking, as I mentioned. we are providing 300,000 clean cooking stoves to communities that are heavily dependent on wood. 60%, you're the data person, 60% of Africans rely on wood as fuel. Mm-hmm. This is unhealthy, as you know. It's detrimental to the environment. So we are providing clean cook stoves for these communities. And the beauty is we have, because of the demand of our project, we have brought in a company, very well known, to Nigeria to set up an assembly plant that will roll into a manufacturing plant. And all of this is possible through the carbon benefits. So that company is also incentivized to set up that manufacturing plant because of the carbon revenues that they will get. Now, the community is employed to work in that factory. Mm-hmm. They are also using those cook stoves. So they know, as Trevor mentioned, his mom is happy to use those stoves. Mm-hmm. Imagine his mom having to use the stoves. She sees the benefits. Her son, her daughter are working in the factory benefiting. She has 24/7 power to do basic needs she needs in her household. That is a very, very incredible achievement. Another thing to consider is regenerative agriculture and e-mobility. I lump the two together because it's easier to explain. In rural communities, one of the critical needs is feeding and mobility. Everyone needs to move around. We are looking to solve that e-mobility problem and regenerative agriculture because I was there a few months ago. Some of the land where my grandparents farmed in the city of Kano in the northern part of Nigeria actually looks like beach sand. Nothing grows there. Nothing grows there. And so regenerating the landscape, enabling the farmers in the community to eat and sell for commercial value their products is one way, and providing access for movement to be able to supply these goods and services across town. You've created an ecosystem of people who are suddenly below poverty line to opportunities to escape that. And e-mobility provides also development when it comes to power. Suddenly you have people relying less on the grid. In Africa, the grid really isn't that strong, but we are getting there. You have fragmented mini-grids. You have people who are building capacity in manufacturing car batteries, EV batteries. You have solar mini-grids. It builds an entire healthy ecosystem of development across Africa. And those are the things we would love to see.
Right. Well, I think what you've painted a picture is really of connecting the dots between various aspects of development, various aspects of the energy economy, and where I feel this is going is that we are putting a value to carbon. We are putting a value and a verification to the whole carbon credit process. And I think, in some of our conversations earlier with you and also Ken, carbon is somewhat of a chemical abstraction. So to be able to put that value is what is really, bringing so many stakeholders together. I think we've had a very patient audience, and I think it's just justified that we should take some questions from the audience. So we have mics, so we can have maybe, if someone can put up their hands, we'd be happy to take, or I do see one coming in here. Maybe I can take this one while somebody raises their hands. So there is a question that the media is reporting that only a handful of rainforest projects show evidence of deforestation projects. How accurate is this statement? Any one of you?
Right, there's a lot of negative press, like a lot of anti-nature press out there at the moment. There seems to be a very concerted anti-nature effort in the media. What you will have heard of on stage from Mariam, there are real projects out there which are making an enormous impact, which we can validate and verify using satellite data, but they're also having a massive impact on people's lives in the global south. So I think it's really important we take this anti-nature agenda and really start to pull it apart. We've done some of that at Space Intelligence, and some of the data which has been used to run these assessments, it comes from these global data sets which are very poorly calibrated to be used in particular contexts. So these global analyses, it's good to give you a global picture. They're less useful for the particular case in Nigeria because forests in Nigeria look very different to Miombo woodlands in East Africa, for instance. The econometrics, so the applied statistics which are used to assess impact, The core notion is you're trying to compare an area which has received a project intervention with an area which hasn't received an intervention but is otherwise very, very similar. There are some absurd comparisons in there. And so some of the approaches which have been used to assess impact are not very robust. That said, I mean, there are projects out there which haven't had the impact which has been claimed. But I think Kenneth just made the point in the previous panel that this is a nascent market which isn't perfect. So we have an option here. We have a choice as a global community. Given the urgency of the challenge, option one is that you say many projects haven't had the impact claimed. So we're going to abandon a verified carbon market. Option two is you say, well, we take the lessons that we've learned over the past 18 years and we build that into the next 18 years of carbon market development. We incorporate those learnings, we incorporate the technology which is available now, and we scale that to enable the kind of national level action which Mariam's envisaging with Article 6 trade. So I would put to all of you, be bold, take the second path, learn from mistakes of the past and build a better future.
Right.
Absolutely.
And would you like to comment?
Yeah, I'd like to comment on the government engagement. One of the things we found, can you hear me, very attractive is when governments see that carbon credits are actually an export commodity, that presents a very big opportunity to have discussions around Article 6. And that is one thing that Carbon Vista is promoting. I'd like to mention that we were the second company that RVCMC signed an MOU with in Nairobi to supply high-quality offsets to the kingdom. And we're very, very proud to be able to achieve this. And one way to do that is to demonstrate that you have financing capacity, project execution capacity, and someone to purchase those offsets directly off you. That gives clarity to African governments that, okay, actually, this is not an abstract product. This is something that actually can generate value for the country, in addition to economic development and social development that people can see. That is going to help tremendously in the Article 6 discussions and the ITMO exchange discussions that we are championing.
I'm glad you brought that trade element, because I think even in the intergovernmental G20 framework, as we go to Brazil now from India, I think the trade element is getting more exaggerated. But yeah,
I just wanted to follow up on a couple of points which Mariam made. I think there's a question, Nikki, somewhere over there. But the first one was that the type of projects which you were describing, Mariam, that's exactly the kind of high-quality project which the market demands. That was the first quick point. And the second one is zooming out from everything you've described. It's actually writ large. This is a massive economic development opportunity. This is a macro development opportunity offering jobs and growth for the global south. I think that's actually a really big picture. At a time we've heard a lot about the squeeze on sub-Saharan Africa as rates have gone up. This provides a massive opportunity. So I think that's something worth picking up on. Sorry.
The next, yeah, sure, thanks.
Christine Gould. I'm the founder and CEO of an organization called Thought for Food, and we're working on agri-food tech innovation and investment. And so I wanted to kind of double down on the point that you made about the possibilities for regenerative agriculture. In some developed markets, it's really helped foster the transition for farmers towards more sustainable practices by being able to tap into the carbon markets. But there is a period of transition, usually 5 to 7 years, that farmers need to undertake to move away from synthetic inputs towards more biological approaches or use of things like biochar, et cetera. And I just wanted to see what possibilities you saw in the global south around agriculture as, you know, a key opportunity in the carbon market, also challenges in that space. And then the other question, somewhat related, is just about how this carbon credit paradigm can benefit indigenous peoples. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll take the second question because I like talking about that. When I first got into this space, one of the key questions I asked people who had been in this space ahead of me was, how do you explain to rural communities what a carbon credit is? And what I found was actually it is possible to explain to indigenous communities what carbon credits are. And I won't go into much detail, but once the people see the benefit of reducing the emissions and they get value from it, they adopt the policies. I'll give you one example. For clean cooking, when we adopted the desire to provide these cook stoves to people, we supply the cook stove at a very, very subsidized rate to them. Clearly, they can see that this stove, that looks there's a premium version of it, a slightly more premium that's selling in the market for about 4 or 5 times. So already they know that I'm getting a benefit from it. And the explanation to that is not only are you helping the environment, you're actually getting this device for much cheaper because you are supporting the cutting down of less trees. And that's very easy to understand for local communities. And so I hope that addresses your question. Engagement with them is actually very, very possible. It requires speaking their language and what they can understand. And pardon me, what was her first question?
I think the point about how to transition to more sustainable agriculture, that
regenerative
it's a 5 to 7 year period to get onto regenerative agriculture.
Regenerative.
If we are seeing evidence of that in the projects.
Yes, so I'll take it, and I'm sure you have a lot more context, Marie, to add.
We have 1 minute left, so
right.
we will
For us,
include in that.
regenerative agriculture presents an opportunity to give farmers, let's say you have a parcel of land that's this big, you divide 1/3 to plant carbon sequestering trees, a second to planting trees for subsistence, for use, and a third for commercial use. That's an opportunity that every farmer understands. The challenges, of course, are turning this beach sand into viable farming land. It requires being able to actually even verify that this process there's a methodology to sequester the carbon, and this carbon can be verified and able to be traded internationally. That is those are the opportunities and the challenges we see. Murray?
Exactly. So the most ambitious projects we're now seeing include afforestation restoration, avoided losses, and sustainable agriculture across an entire landscape. We're now mapping all of Kenya and Tanzania at the moment, and so we of course see that diverse landscape. But I see Trevor looming,
yes.
And that is 3, 2, 1, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Murray and Mariam, to give us much food for thought, and we will go to verified carbon markets. Thank you very much to all.
All right, thank you very much. Another round of applause for Gauri as she comes up with the panelists. Thank you very much. Mariam, our smiling scuba diver, thank you very much. And Murray, he says he's a recovering academic. He has read so much, he doesn't want to read anything else, not even a billboard. He has read everything, all right? So, like Newcombe mentioned earlier on, this is a new sector for all of us. Carbon credits itself as a commodity is only about 18 years. So there'll be a lot of chaos, there'll be a lot of disagreement, there'll be a lot of difference of opinion, but we trust our captains, Rania and Riham, to steer the way, and we will figure it out as a people. If you're a new parent like myself, you know very well that you thrive in chaos. In fact, when you hear a lot of noise from the upstairs, that's when you're happy. You just shout, stop, even if you don't know what they're doing. Now, the silence is where the problem is. When they're quiet, you rush upstairs. You find them washing your laptop in water. You're so defeated, the only thing you will tell them is you've used too much soap. You've used too much soap. So, now, let me introduce my next panelist if they're ready. And this will be moderated by Eric Ringvold. Eric Ringvold is the Associate Partner, McKinsey & Company. A round of applause as he comes up. Tommy Ricketts, CEO, B0 Carbon. Another round of applause as he comes up. Thank you so much. Sarah Al-Suhaimi, Chairperson, Saudi Tadawul Group. Thank you for coming up. And we have Captain Ibrahim Koshi, CEO, Saudi Airlines. Thank you very much. And Ibrahim Al-Buanain, EVP, Global Manufacturing, Aramco. Thank you very much. So this panel is a bit more elaborate, so before we take a tea break, we'll allow them 40 minutes. Is that okay with everyone else? By a show of hands, everybody who agrees with me, we give them 40 minutes. Thank you very much. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Trevor. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. What a pleasure to be here at the Global South Carbon Markets Conference. Huge thank you to PIF and RVCMC for bringing this distinguished group together and for all of the important discussions that are happening here today. We've heard a lot this morning about the role carbon markets have in the Global South as a whole. We've heard a lot about the role it can play in Africa, but it can also have a huge impact here in the MENA region. And that's what we're going to be delving into in the panel today. Really happy to get together with this distinguished group. And to kick us off, Ibrahim, you've been on this journey since the beginning. Can you describe a little bit for us how has this journey been, both from a KSA perspective, but also how has this journey been from an Aramco perspective?
Okay, good morning everyone, and thank you Eric for introducing me. I'm really wearing two hats, the Aramco hats as well as the RVCMC. So when it comes on the urgency of global warming, this is something that we are doing it for many, many years. You know, in Aramco, we looked at the importance of the environment and the emissions many years ago. And if you recall, in the opening remarks by His Excellency Ramayan, that he was mentioning about Aramco is the low carbon intensity. And last year we showcased the Archie, which is a big data algorithms that calculate the carbon emission from the source all the way to the end users. As a company, of course, we announced our commitment to zero net, or net zero by 2050, but also we announced by 2035 we'll be eliminating 52 million tons of carbon. And these are measurable things that we have been doing. So when it comes in the context of decarbonization as a strategy, we have 5 levers that we are doing it. Some of them that we've been doing it since the 70s. These are including energy efficiency, flaring and emission reduction, renewables, and the last 2, which is carbon capture and carbon sequestration and carbon credit, that we've been involved, I will say, the last 5-6 years. So the first 2, it's a capital intensive that we've been doing for many, many years. That's why we are the lowest carbon emitters when it comes on the oil and gas. The renewable, probably we started back in 2008. We have the pilot program in one of our facility in Dhahran that we produce using solar panel to produce power for our facilities. Now, let me talk a little bit more on the carbon credit and why we are so interested. Personally, I come from the trading side of the business. So we found an opportunity that some of our customers want to have a carbon net or a carbon offset for one of their cargoes. So it was a journey for us to learn how we do it, where we buy, how to register it, how to cancel it. So we work closely with guys from Aramco and Riham in sharing the knowledge of it. This is where we have the kickstart. This is probably in 2019. Now, for us, carbon credit is part of the decarbonization, so we cannot decarbonize our emission without using carbon credits. So carbon credit is also an important for our own decarbonization to reach that target by 2050. We are also catering for our customers. Our customers want oil, refined product with carbon offset. So we need to generate that carbon credit to offset the emission. And we have a competitive advantage because our emission is low. So when we decarbonize that cargo or that for that customer, we have a competitive advantage. In addition to that, we are gearing in our trading arm to have an emission book that do this type of activities. I think like Miriam mentioned about why they are partnering with VTOL, because they are doing these type of things. That's why we are partnering with RVCM on that front.
Yeah, thank you. And like you say, Aramco has been part of this since the beginning, and so has Tadawul, being an early investor in this market. And you know, when you got into this two-ish years ago, there was nothing in the region, no demand, no supply, no one talking about this. What gave you the confidence as Tadawul to enter the space as an investor and a shareholder in that moment?
Thank you, Eric, for this question. Actually, Tadawul has a commitment to execute on Vision 2030. and on the financial sector development program through achieving the development of the capital markets in Saudi Arabia and also in the region. We are today leaders in the region by size and by liquidity and by many other measures. We're the ninth largest global market today. So part of this is actually also helping our Saudi corporates to achieve their objectives. One of them is transparency, and of course, many of our Saudi corporates, whether listed today or going to be listed in the future, are committed to a lower carbon emission. So with the partnership with PIF, we thought that we can play a very big role, both in helping setting up the exchange and at the same time education to and facilitating the the demand side from the community here.
Yeah, and how have you seen the journey? So from zero to where you are today?
I think we have achieved a lot today. As we heard earlier from Yazid Al-Humaid, we already held 2 auctions, one in this event last year where 1.4 million carbon credits were bought by Saudi companies, another one in June earlier this year with over 2 million carbon credits also bought by Saudi companies, both listed and unlisted companies. And I think part of what we're doing here today is extremely important in creating awareness for this and making everyone who is interested and have ESG on their minds. And today, very important thing to note that at least 26% of our listed companies already starting reporting sustainability, using either the guidelines that the exchange supplied for them or in any way that they feel obliged to do. Aramco is one of them, and we wanted to make them understand that they can start somewhere, and for other companies that did not start, that the exchange is available for them to start this journey. So I think we're still in the early days, but I think we're off to a good start.
And I think that is such an important point, right? How do you get companies who are currently not doing anything to get started on their journey, right? Mm-hmm. And really appreciate that story about the frameworks that are taking them there, but also, you know, how carbon credits play a part in this journey from the beginning, right, of companies' transition plans. And maybe I can ask you, Captain Ibrahim, how you went on this, how you as the sustainability journey of Saudi and how carbon credits has fed into that journey.
Our journey as an airline, the airline as a carbon credit buyer actually started a while back. So we, as an airline operating in international regions, different parts of the world, there were standards, regulations that we had to be aware of and to comply with. And so when we think about our journey, it really started with CORSIA, with EU ETS, UK ETS, and this was the beginning of the journey. But as we got into where we are today with, let's say, the regional voluntary carbon market with its establishment, Saudi was actually one of the initial leading 5 companies which partnered with RVCM. And I think that was, it was very important partnering with them as a buyer of the credits. And it's important because when you think about, as an airline, we have a lot of global exposure, and we are investing in sustainability. And our sustainability initiatives are things such as fleet renewals, weight reductions on the aircraft, imposing standards on our vendors and our suppliers that have to be aligned with our sustainability initiatives. And at the same time, we know those all contribute to reducing the emissions, but it does not eliminate it. And so the carbon credit purchase, that's the step where we can actually work towards offsetting the emissions that we cannot eliminate. And that's something that we're proud of as being part of what we've partnered with the MENA RVCM. And it's something that's it's significant so far. I think there's also challenges which we will face, and going forward from where we are today, there's been a lot of, let's say, challenges earlier on in the carbon credits that you purchase. Were they aligned with your sustainability initiatives, with your goals? I think there's been progress in those areas with certain standards and with the monitoring of the carbon credits. We're particularly happy with our partner that we're working with on RVCM. And while there's progress in that area, I think one of the bigger challenges that we will continue to face as we go forward from here, and that's the limited supply of quality carbon credits. It's going to lead to higher prices. And the higher prices, it's going to make it more difficult for buyers, airlines such as us, to meet the targets in offsetting that we're working towards. So that's one of the bigger challenges that we will continue to face as the market progresses.
Yeah, but I love the spirit, right? Which is, we need to go to the high quality ones, and
yes,
identifying them and pricing them is going to be key. And Tommy, that's probably a good way to segue over to you, right? And maybe talk a little bit about what you do at B0, the challenges you broadly see with high quality credits in the market today.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for the comments that have come before. Before I talk about B0, I thought it might be interesting just to have a statistic for you. So we looked at the total emissions from the MENA region, and it's about 3.4 billion tons of CO2 in 2021. And the total number of credits purchased was about 36 million. So looking at about 0.1% of credits were purchased for every ton emitted. But if you compare that to the total amount of purchased in the world, actually it's 9% of emissions come from this region, and about 5% of credits were purchased globally. So actually, the MENA region is doing a lot already to actually be contributing from a global perspective, and that emissions versus credits number looks a bit deceiving. So we're a rating agency in the house of the most famous rating agency of them all, but we only assess the quality of carbon credits. Over time, maybe we'll look at other instruments like biodiversity, etc. And our role is to provide another layer, an independent layer of information analysis to say, to what extent is this carbon credit delivering on its claim, which is to avoid or remove a ton of carbon. We think that's very helpful because, in my mind, there are two challenges today in the carbon market. How do I understand the quality or the integrity of the credit that I'm buying? And how do I use this credit to make a claim, whether it's a compliance claim, a transition framework claim, or just a competitive differentiation claim? And the rating is a system, it's a language of risk using capital markets frameworks to say, okay, well, how do I actually go about and say, okay, well, I want quality, but what does that mean? Well, is it additional in the region that I'm actually investing in? Is it permanent? Is it going to be there for the period of time that I actually think there's going to be claiming there? The carbon accounting that's being used, is that accurate? A lot of it's based on forecasts. How realistic are those forecasts and those baselines they're using? And it's that next step down from the general awareness of, do I need to buy a carbon credit and why am I buying a carbon credit, to, okay, why am I buying this particular one? And for what reason can I justify that? Because clearly, in today's voluntary landscape, reputation is a big risk for a lot of people. And this is one guard that you can say to say, at least I understand the risks that I'm embarking upon this journey. And then look, what we're actually seeing today is a big shift away from buying in the what we call the secondary market, the trading markets, towards building the long-term capacity of the future. And so we actually pivoted our business as well to be looking at rating pre-issuance. So a vast majority of our inbound at the moment is talking to people who are building the future supply and saying, whether it's forestry, carbon capture, other types of industrial processes, how can we be making sure that we solve the integrity challenges in the legacy supply for the future supply that's coming, and in therefore building that resilience into the actual system from scratch, not just trying to figure out what to buy and based on legacy.
Yeah. And Tommy, for players in a room who may be thinking about generating carbon credits in the kingdom, in the MENA region, what advice would you give them in terms of what they should be looking out for ensuring that the credits they're generating are going to be of the highest quality and are going to rate high in your framework? Yeah,
so there's three broad camps: additionality, carbon accounting, and non-permanence. We have different risk factors, ways of explaining it, but that's the key categories. So for nature, what you're looking at is, would that intervention have taken place anyway, otherwise? What's the level of government support? What's the level of private support for that to take place? So just an example, in forestry, where you have 3 different types, afforestation, improved forest management, and avoided deforestation, you can have very different types of additionality for the 3 of them. If this is an already profitable plantation, that's very different from no one has ever protected this region in the history of its existence and it's encroached by local population. Or there is no reason why I would reforest that region because it's very profitable cropland, and that's actually, you know, that's my opportunity cost. Carbon accounting, this is where we use a lot of geospatial analysis, particularly for nature, or for industrial processes like carbon capture, you're seeing lots more frontier, high cadence analysis. Say, okay, well, how have I actually established the carbon stock, how much I will remove or avoid, what's the intervention I'm preventing, either the deforestation or often zero for removal projects, and then how am I calculating stuff like risk buffers and leakage analysis to say, okay, well, I'm protecting it in this area, but why don't I just go down the road and cut it down there, and am I actually having a systematic effect? So those are the key things from carbon accounting. And then on non-permanence, it's really 2 axes. It's the legal system under which the project's operating. I think the colleague before him was talking very eloquently about getting local communities on board as a way of actually instilling long-term permanence. That's a fantastic way of, you know, looking at that community and legal aspect. And the other side is just what's the actual type of sequestration or avoidance that's taking place. Is it 30, 50, 100 years, or is it geological? In which case, you know, the classic line is you've got permanent storage and carbon capture, but no one's going to be here to find out whether it's there or not in 5,000 years, so how do you tell? So that's a very different type of thing to the legal side where you're saying, well, is there incentives to actually make sure this thing continues to be protected? So those are the areas to look at. And I'll just maybe finish by saying, often we find that there is a trade-off. There's a trade-off between the amount of credits that you're willing to generate or seeking to generate and the price that you're wanting to achieve in the market, because the value is just price times quantity. So potentially in the spirit of Captain Ibrahim's comments, you know, you want to see inflation happening in this sector. You want to see prices rising. That's a good thing. But on the other hand, from the projects, you know, are they confident they can secure that price? Well, maybe not. That's why they issue more credits. And that's a sort of cycle there of its own making, which is very important. So, you know, if you get very low prices, you'll get very high issuance. You know, and so that's just something for the market to solve, in my opinion. And hopefully metrics like ours are a really good indicator of, you know, third-party analysis, which can provide users and everyone in the market a system to assess that.
Yeah, thank you, Tommy. And Ibrahim, as a potential developer of carbon credits, you know, Aramco have some plans in this regard. How do you react to what Tommy was saying? Is this clear for a project developer how to go ahead, or do you see a lot of challenges navigating through these frameworks?
So if you look today, what we have, RVMC is trying to bring the supplier and the demand generation. So producer of credit and user of credit system, and probably governance around it and what have you. But what is mostly important here, especially in the kingdom, is the role of the government. And last week there was a major announcement during the United Nations MENA week or climate week. His Royal Highness Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman announced the greenhouse gas credit and offset mechanism by creating what they call it the Designated National Authority, DNA. And the role of this body is really to put the rules, the policy, and the strategy for the decarbonization. So once this has been cleared to all the players within the country here, that will actually, fast forward the financeability of these projects, and then you see an acceleration of either a production or a producer of a credit or a user of the credit to decarbonize that strategy. So this is a very significant, I think, that will enable and accelerate the decarbonization in the region. So again, the role of the government is very critical to really accelerate that thing. Of course, the quality of the credit, this is a big thing that need to be looked into. You will always get this criticism, no matter what you do. So that will need time, but I think what we have been doing is something that is really reducing the emission and actually achieving the target that we were looking for.
Yeah, so government is really key to ensure that the players have confidence, right, in going ahead with their plans. So having that sort of private-public alignment from the beginning. Very much hear you. And could you give a bit of a flavor as well to what kind of project types that you'll be developing and where you see the potential in the kingdom and in the MENA region for carbon credit projects?
You know, for us, we are doing both. We are doing a project that give us more credit, like the renewables as an example. Also the forestation, the mangrove building. These are programs that we are doing to reduce emissions, but in the same time, we are also buying some of these credit, whether from RVMC or from other players for other use. So we are on both sides, from the producer for our own use, or sometimes we trade as well because of the quality, because this is also as an opportunity for trading activities. You trade these credits. Yeah. So many things that we are doing in all front, but the majority of our carbon capture is the major to address the energy transition, like the hydrogen. So capturing the carbon and sequestrates it. This is a very significant programs that we are going through.
Yeah, and I suppose,
but that's probably for our own use. So we are not going to sell it for somebody else. It's our use.
Yeah, so perhaps not yourself, but generally speaking, I suppose opportunity
exactly
is pretty big for all kind of CCS-based projects in the kingdom, which will be an exciting opportunity to follow over the coming years.
Sure.
But maybe, Sarah, so over to you. What would you like to see? What are the sort of solutions you want to point to that can help take the MENA region forward in this market?
It's exactly what we're trying to do here. We're trying to build an exchange for carbon credits that's focused on the global south, in both supply and demand. And when you think about exchanges and their role in any economy, exchanges provide three things. One, availability. Second, transparency. And third is standards. And this actually creates the platform where we can, supply and demand can meet in a transparent way, where there is transparency on the product, on pricing, on risk framework, and everything else. And this is the role we are trying to play in RVCMC, leveraging on our experience and our connectivity globally, and this benefits all stakeholders. So this is what we are trying to work on here. This is why we're here today. This is why we're part of this initiative that we believe in, and we think this will enhance our efforts to grow even further, to become a global financial hub, since we are already today a global investment destination.
It's going to help put a price signal on what MENA-based credits are going to be.
At least it's going to be transparent. You can see it happen. There can be benchmarks. There can be a track record. And this is extremely important in order to, for assurance for everyone and all parts, all stakeholders in these transactions.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'd love to switch gears a little bit and also talk a little bit about how the MENA region as a whole can help drive impact across the world, right? We talked a lot about how MENA can, what we can do in MENA, but I think, all of you have a huge role in influencing the global debate. So, Captain Ibrahim, what role do you think MENA buyers, in your instance, can do in terms of driving this global market forward?
You know what? It takes me back to June of 2023. I think the second auction of the RVCMC, which took place in Nairobi, Kenya, very recently, it sent a message that the RVCMC is expanding its market to the broader global south. I think it's also important that as buyers, many of the Saudi companies that participate in that, we know that we contributed in enabling projects that reduced emissions in environmentally and socially effective ways. And that expansion of that market, it's important because it's something that needs to grow. And I think as buyers, companies, large and the medium-sized that are currently participating, I think if we continue that, it's a leadership that sends a a message to others, becoming more aware, and it sets a goal that, or a pace that others may follow. So I think it's an important message that as we continue in this, we're creating an awareness, and others may follow in those footsteps as we go forward from here.
Ibrahim, anything to add to that?
It's going to be more challenging probably for, I can say that for maybe smaller businesses and others because of the availability. But just getting that awareness, they'll be able to contribute maybe in other ways through their own initiatives. But it's a stepping stone to get them there.
Yeah.
It is a stepping stone. They will get there.
Yeah. And Ibrahim, in terms of the sort of shaping the global dialogue and global debates, do you see the region stepping up more and more in this regard?
I think it's always about the starting point. And if you look at the RVMC, trying to bring all the players, they are not Saudi focused only, although the market is huge here. But bringing Global South part of it, I think the auction in Kenya is a good demonstration that the inclusion of countries and projects. And the project is not about carbon credit only, but also carbon emission avoidance, like what we talked about, the biomass and all of that. This is really, you are not contributing to the environment, but also to the society as well. So the more players you bring, the more dialogue that you bring, that will definitely strengthen the confidence of the market and the people around it. So I believe this has multiple dimensions, not only emission, is economical development of the nations. People will aware about what they are doing in their normal life. These are changes. This is required a paradigm shift in the way we are doing our life and doing our style in our daily life. So these are a critical part that if we done it right, so we avoid the question of that quality thing and fraud, these type of project, this definitely will embrace the whole program. So we are still in the early stages of this type, but once it is kicking, regulated, then we have a different shift in this market.
I love that. And Sarah, in that vein, to the group we have here today, what would you like them to do coming out of this conference? What would you like to see this group take away as actions?
Thank you, Eric. Actually, climate change, of course, is a global issue. It's not just a local issue. So I think if the audience take away from today the awareness that we're here, we're starting something that can enable them to achieve their goals. Carbon credits is a good place to start. And once they do and educate themselves, they can be advocates of this as well. And we're here, and a big part of this initiative is also education and awareness for a better life for everyone.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tommy, anything to add? Anything you'd like to see?
Yeah, I just think from our perspective, it's very good to see, there's a capital markets opportunity. You need to find a way of, ultimately carbon credits is about financing preservation and restoration in nature via natural or technological interventions. And this is an amazing area of technology and investment in another form of that, which is fossil fuel and other forms of energy extraction. So there's a lot of knowledge here that needs to be applied to the preservation and restoration of the environment. But also just seeing this as an actual economic opportunity. That's the big thing for us. It's not just a problem-solving issue. It's an opportunity-creating thing. And so this is clearly from the room, you can see that a lot of people see this as an opportunity. See this as a way of pivoting activity, investment, new forms of employment to different parts of the economy. And I think that's also really interesting for us, to not just see it as a cost, to see it as an actual sense of economic potential.
Thank you. And thank you all. Big round of applause for our panelists. We do still have time for some questions as well. They can both come in through Slido or raising your hand, even better. So can we get a mic over?
Hi, thank you for a great conversation. My name is Ayla Majid. I run a company that works in decarbonization and energy transition. The question that I have is around carbon credit scaling for non-nature-based projects. While nature-based projects are extremely important, I have a concern with regards to the readiness of the market to scale non-nature-based carbon projects. Last year's numbers were like, out of the total market, only 0.1% credits were coming from carbon capture. So we will not meet our goals unless we work in reducing the carbon intensity. And these are really, really important initiatives. So I would really like to know that what is the readiness to help scale the market, and the Global South in particular requires that kind of support. Thank you.
Would anyone like to have a shot?
Contribute. Actually, the total, so there's 4 categories in carbon markets. There's nature and technology, and there's avoidance and removal. So actually the most credits are in the technology avoidance category today. So that's old stuff like renewables, that's landfill gas, that's industrial processes. But the right category, which is tech removal, is 0.002 of supply percent. And that category is very expensive. So typically in those industries, you need large government subsidies to drive down the price. And that's where compliance markets will be so important. But the reason why often you're seeing such a large investment in them is because apart from the US, you tend to have quite small countries that have high industrial outputs that have basically low land use. So the Global South is where you have very land-rich countries that need to see a massive wealth transfer to restoring nature, and probably not necessarily in many instances, outside of major fossil fuel creating countries, are in need of big carbon capture schemes because you have the actual land available to restore. Whereas in other economies, particularly Western Europe, you don't have that. That's one part of it. The other one is scaling capital. Well, it's 2 things. You need to have a bid. So you have to force them to buy it. So the only thing that will really cause that to happen is you mandate that they have to purchase these things, which will drive down the price because you get an investment cycle. But today, that's a long way. The price on the one side is $5, another one is $500. The only way you do that is by forcing the demand. That's our perspective.
So
if I could add one thing to that, there's a critical problem, and we need to scale those solutions now. And getting buyers to start buying, even if it's a little sliver of these kind of credits in their portfolios, from the get-go, that's what we're going to need to see the curve going up over time and actually the prices coming down. So really important debate. I believe, do we have a question over here as well?
Well, I have 2 questions, if I may. First one is about the carbon capture that Aramco is doing with, I think, Siemens, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, it's still unproven, and there are many critics of that technology. How would that transfer into a profitable carbon credit initiative? That's the first question. The second question is, for carbon credit sellers, how can they reach to buyers now? I'm not sure about the voluntary carbon market, how it works, but how can they reach directly or through that market? I'm not sure how the mechanism is.
Okay, maybe suggest you take the first one.
I'll take this one because this is a continuation of the first question. So you're right. You cannot do it with carbon credit to do all of that. So as I mentioned, in Aramco, we do energy efficiency, we do gas collection and stop flaring. These 2 is a capital intensive. There's a lot of money spent. People doesn't realize how much money we put under the ground to get the oil with no gas. Third one, renewable, and everybody knows about it. The carbon sequestration, I'll come to your question, and of course the carbon offset that we do in the project. CSU is nothing new. Actually, we have already, I think some of our assets already have the certificate of carbon capture. It's basically you collect the carbon, pipe it, and naturally we have a huge sink hole under the ground. We push it there. This is how we do it. Not every country has the same characterization like Kingdom. So the cost of sequestration varies from country to country and technology to technology. Still not cheap, but it can be worked around the cost by subsidies and or creating a carbon price. So whereas once you have a carbon price, then that things will kick on. For us, like, to get the hydrogen, the blue ammonia, this is the energy transition. These today, we can produce them, including the carbon capture. That costs you, if it's blue, it costs you $200 per barrel equivalent. And if it's a green, it will cost you around $400 per barrel equivalent. Is the market willing to pay? I would say no. Nobody is willing to pay for that thing. So this is where the challenge that we have. But the technology is there. How to reduce the cost of technology, like any technology, start with high cost as you go with the time to reduce the cost of carbon sequestration to a level that it is affordable for the consumer. This is the affordability element when it comes on the energy transition.
The reachability of the
carbon
credit sellers.
So call our guys in Aramco Trading, they will buy for you, or they sell for you.
Aramco?
Aramco Trading.
Aramco Trading, okay. How about Saudi?
As an airline,
we can sell to them as well.
We'll have to go through other markets. As an airline, we're not at that level for it. It's a small percentage.
It is a market. There is a market.
We're creating the exchange for you to do this now.
And then the exchange
so
will be there.
it's in the works.
I'm talking about now. The exchange
Yes.
The exchange.
We did 2 auctions
RVCMC
where we
auctions.
connected the sellers to the buyers.
Yes.
mashallah.
Yeah. We held an auction here last year, and we held an auction in June. Yeah.
Riham was raising her hand over there, so I think she's
You will have
ready to take your order.
The third auction coming soon.
So what we're doing over here, we're setting up the market for buyers to connect buyers and sellers together. And that's what we're doing, helping Aramco, helping Saudi, all the other companies to buy credit. What we offer is we check the quality. So it's very important for us to ensure the integrity of what we sell. And that's why, for instance, in the first auction, we had 2 due diligence teams. We did it also in the second auction. We excluded a lot of projects to ensure the quality of what we sell. This is very core, and this is the service we provide to our buyers for free. And this is part of our, as well, DNA, is part of our brand. So hope that helps.
We have one final question. Last question over here.
Thank you. Hi, Alvin from Morgan Stanley. Maybe 2 questions, actually, if it's okay, Eric. The first one is, how can we encourage and should we encourage regulators to create a compliance carbon market in MENA with penalties for non-compliance and then allow the fungibility of voluntary carbon credits into the program? That's the first question. The second question, maybe for Sarah, is how can we encourage companies in Tadawul to maybe use voluntary carbon credits to make certain claims if they were to participate in the scheme? Thank you.
So about the regulatory framework, of course, I'm not the right person to actually answer this. However, increasing in general, regulations are there to address a certain issue, right? So this is a beginning. We are today encouraging our companies to actually think about their carbon emissions. The kingdom itself is committed to a lower carbon emissions, and many of our companies already made this vow. One of them is Saudi, sitting right here, and they are now embarking on this journey. So I think this will develop as time develops, and many other questions are answered in terms of quality, supply, and how to do this. Carbon credits is only one way of managing the whole ESG and climate issue. The second question was, I didn't hear it.
I think the second question was on, or the first question rather, was on
quality.
How compliance markets could come into MENA and how voluntary carbon markets could fit into that. I'm happy to have a crack in it. Obviously, I think compliance markets in the long run is the biggest driver of all, right? To get things to work, and that is the sort of path that's been demonstrated in other countries to work. So perhaps, I think time will tell. We have more panels in the afternoon that maybe can help explore this question further. But I think for now, time to wrap this one up. So thank you again to the wonderful group. Thank you.